and via your smart speaker.
Pienaar and Friends on Times Radio with Barclays Business Banking.
It is good to have you with us here on Pienaar and Friends, an hour of good conversation in very good company, which tonight is Rachel Cunliffe, the Associate Editor at the New Statesman. Hey, Rachel.
Hello.
Good to see you. Tim Montgomerie back with us. They come as a pair, Rachel and Tim. Good to see you, Tim.
Well, we thought we came as a pair, but we've been added to tonight.
You're now got a trio of friends.
A baby.
And the baby of the group is Roger Boyes, the Diplomatic Editor of the Times. Hi, Roger.
Hello.
And in honour of your guest appearance on the show, what is your thought for the day?
Well, I mean, my thought of the day isn't particularly original because it's a column which I've just written about the end of the Iranian regime and how you can smell these things. Because I lived through end of communism and all these and you can just smell when a regime has just reached its exhaustion point.
Well, that sounds like an interesting thought and a very interesting column. I just dive into it a little bit more because not too many people are saying this regime in Iran is, as we stand here, is tottering. It's on its last legs. How do you get from here to there?
Well, first of all, you have to see who's in charge, and we've got an 86-year-old supreme leader who's been in complete isolation and is. And his source of power is talking regularly to the Revolutionary Guard and the commanders of the Revolutionary Guard. He's not doing that anymore, therefore his power source isn't there. So what you've got there is the germ of some kind of change of this clerico-authoritarian regime because there's nothing standing it up. And then you look at what's been going on over the last 12 days and, the sheer penetration of Iranian society by the Israelis, that shows that really that society isn't functioning as a police state anymore. Yeah. It's completely, every phone call is made available, to Western intelligence, to Israeli intelligence, but to Western intelligence too, through different bases.
It's really interesting.
And then Trump bombing.
Trump bombing. Yeah. I mean, hold on to those thoughts, Roger. I definitely want to come back to that. I've been seeing these lines of the hardliners in the military gaining in strength, which is part of what you're talking about there. And I guess another question I want to get into later on when we go down that route is this: it's just further incitement to Israel to look for more reason to try and push them over the edge, and the idea that is Israel now going to need a lot of restraint now from Trump. Who else can do it? As the ceasefire goes on, maybe more outbursts from Donald Trump. Four letter outbursts. We'll see. We'll share thoughts on that with you a bit later on. Tim, what's your thought for the day?
Well, I was slightly unwell over the last 24 hours, and so I haven't yet had opportunity to respond to the Reform Policy announcement yesterday on introducing a sort of special £250,000 one-off tax that would be for very rich people they want to attract to Britain, and
the Britannia card.
The Britannia card reminds me of a hotel chain that I've never been impressed with, but that's another issue. And give this money to poorer people. Now, apparently it tests quite well. It sounds good on the surface, but I haven't yet seen an authoritative sort of expert who looked at this policy and thinks it's very good. It really basically amounts to quite a substantial tax giveaway without much upside. And I did warn Nigel Farage when I joined Reform that I would be an awkward fellow traveller, but they are doing so well. And justifiably, they're doing very well. Nigel Farage is the most outstanding politician of our generation. But please slow down. What the public want from Reform, want from us, is after what I think will be a period of both the Tories and Labour failing, they will want to kick the tyres hard, the public, and know that we aren't going to be the same. Yeah. And why the rush? It's 3 years to an election. Don't announce policies until they're absolutely solid. Look like you're cautious and pragmatic and thoughtful rather than just trying to win the headline race. And this isn't the first time they've done it, and I'm not quite sure why they're doing it. And it's they don't need an extra little bit of percentage in the opinion polls. What they need is brand reassurance. And so if Nigel's listening, I've given this advice in private and now I'm giving it in public. Slow down, be more consistent.
Well, aside from that little bit of Trumpian level adulation that we got there for Nigel Farage, if you go on like this, Tim, especially on this show, you're gonna lose the whip if you had a whip to lose.
I think I probably haven't got that already.
Well, you're not going to get your peerage. It's just.
Oh right, okay. Can I take back what I just said?
All right, Tim. Rachel, what's your thought for that day?
Well, from Reform to the Conservatives, I chaired an event last night at the Mile End Institute at Queen Mary University on the future of the Conservative Party, entitled "Does the Conservative Party Have a Future?" And there was just an analogy there from the political academic Nigel Fletcher that I thought was really interesting and wanted to share, particularly for listeners who are or were, I suppose, fans of Game of Thrones. There was a quote in there where Daenerys Targaryen, who's the one who's trying to take over the world, talks about the wheel turning. Some families go up, the wheel turns, families go down. That's how power works. And somebody says, you want to stop the wheel. And she says, I don't want to stop the wheel. I want to break the wheel. And the comparison that he was making is, in politics, in a two-party system, parties go up, they're in government for a bit, people get fed up, parties go down, the opposition party comes back up, it's a cycle. And what if what we're seeing at the moment with the Conservative Party is the wheel is broken or is starting to break? And the evidence for this is that we know that Labour's approval ratings have plummeted since the election, but the Conservatives haven't risen.
Yeah.
In fact, they've gone down. And in a two-party system that is kind of based on this trend of one goes up, one goes down, it's a bit like a pendulum. If you have a wild card factor like reform that disrupts that rhythm, it makes recovery very difficult. It means it's very difficult to predict what a recovery could even look like. It's challenging for both of the main parties, but it means that a lot of the assumptions on which we are basing conversations about the recovery of the Conservative Party may in fact be based on a model that is fundamentally broken and doesn't fit what politics is doing at the moment.
Yeah.
I just thought that was really interesting.
It is interesting, and you do hear more of that nowadays than you did, don't you? Music to Tim's ears.
Well, not if they keep coming out with policies like the Britannia card that's completely unfunded and is a tax break for foreign billionaires.
Yeah. Well, maybe Tim can slow down this transition into another sort of the demise of the Liberal Party. Now you're saying it could be the Tories on the way out, one of those historical shifts. Tim's eyes are. I think, are you lighting up, Tim? Or
No, well, you're not a member of a party for 33 years without a lot of affection for it, and fundamentally, I am a Conservative. I believe in conservatism, but the Conservative Party is now. I was talking to a Liberal Democrat MP the other day, and they said their conversations with the Conservative MPs indicated that a good half of them would probably prefer a coalition with Lib Dems rather than Reform. And there's just so many issues now where I think the Conservative Party is fundamentally divided and broken, and it can come back, but it's going to need quite a bit of healing time before it can do that. And I don't think it's really begun the proper inquiry into why they failed in government so badly.
So I get your view on this too, Roger. I mean, you're the world affairs editor. The British politics is part of the world. Do you share this view that we could be looking at an extinction event for the Tory party?
Well, I mean, what's an extinction event? But it's, I've sort of grown up, I suppose, as a foreign correspondent in societies with proportional representation and multiple shifts where 2 percentage points one way or another can see you out of Parliament or in Parliament, and all the various back deals that are done. And I still think the British system, even though it's veering to the chaotic at the moment, is still it is still better. It still produces better results, more solid results. And what you're seeing, therefore, in a lot of these mainland European political systems is, a constant profiting by the far right that are poaching here, poaching there, and they're poaching from across the spectrum. And you're seeing really unnatural combinations to survive. Like in Holland at the moment, you have Social Democrats and Greens essentially merging and not merging and so on. So they're all in an identity crisis. And I don't sense that we have an identity crisis here. I think people on the whole know what they stand for. I know that that's not the, not the zeitgeist. Zeitgeist says, everyone's confused and rudderless. But the truth is they are. People are pretty solid as to what they want and certainly what they don't want.
Yeah. Well, and also getting more solid now about what they don't want than what they do, or keener to protest than they are to make a positive statement about what they do want, which is what I think is driving the Reform Party along just a little bit. It's not the solidity, and Tim gives us another example today, it's not the solidity of their policy platform. It's a handy stick with which to beat the party in.
I'd push back a little bit on that. In the core big questions, like immigration, net zero, the fact that the system is stacked against people who are lower income rather than in smaller towns. Reform of why I'm joined, and I'm still an enthusiastic member, is that I think they are right on the big questions. What they've got to now do is build a policy manifesto on the back of that makes it more real. But I think the judgment of the party is actually quite good, and that's fundamentally why it is thriving in the way it is. I don't think it's just a rejection of the two main parties. Nigel Farage has got lots right in politics over a long period of time.
I mean, we'll have a longer debate no doubt before very long about, yes, hard to disagree. Look, the Reform have got the point when they hit the button marked immigration and immigration control, and certainly just upset with the government about pretty much everything else. People are, but I'm not sure the policy that are being offered by Reform and almost any of those stands really stand up or begin to really stand up at this point. And you get Nigel Farage missing something of the same when he's asked the question, a few times. Anyway, we will come back to that. I just want to break now for a second. Let's have a listen to this, because I said a moment ago Donald Trump is on his way into the Netherlands to join the NATO summit at The Hague. He's been talking to journalists aboard Air Force One. Many tens of thousands of feet in the air, but the miracle of communication allows us to have a listen now. So let's do that.
Consequences for Israel or Iran for breaking?
They didn't do anything. No, they didn't do anything. They would have if I put out a statement on truth, and they didn't do anything.
Sir, how are you confident that this might not happen again? Say in a couple weeks that...
Tired of it. I think they don't want it to happen again. And Iran's not going to have a nuclear weapon, by the way. I think it's the last thing on their mind right now.
Mr. President, did Iran make any commitments yesterday about uranium enrichment?
About what?
About uranium enrichment.
They're not going to have enrichment, and they're not going to have a nuclear weapon, and they know that. They're going to get on to being a great trading nation. They're very good traders. And they're going to be a great trading nation, and they have a lot of oil. They're going to do well. They're not going to have a nuclear weapon.
So did they promise?
The last thing on Iran's mind right now is nuclear weapons.
Can you clarify what you meant when you mentioned regime change in your Truth Social post the other night?
Which?
Regime change. Do you want to see regime change in Iran?
No. If there was, there was. But no, I don't want it. I'd like to see everything calm down as quickly as possible. Regime change takes chaos. And ideally, we don't want to see so much chaos. So we'll see how it does. The Iranians are very good traders, very good business people. And they got a lot of oil. They should be fine. They should be able to rebuild and do a good job. They're never going to have nuclear, but other than that, they should do a great job, which is exactly where I've been saying for years. You cannot let Iran have a nuclear weapon. But we're going to be with, where's Marco? I think Marco's here someplace. Our great Secretary of State. But we cannot let them have a nuclear weapon. They won't have a nuclear weapon. And I will tell you, the last thing on their minds is nuclear weapons. They don't even want to think about nuclear. And our B-2 pilots made this all possible. They had a magnificent hit in the dark of night with no moon, no light, no nothing. They hit the target perfectly, wiped it out. And the press is very disrespectful. I saw CNN fake news going, well, maybe it wasn't a perfect hit, it was perfect. They said maybe it did destroy it. We agree, it did destroy it, but maybe it could have destroyed it more. No, it couldn't have destroyed it more. Everyone hit, and it's very disrespectful to those great geniuses and patriots that flew those planes through tremendous danger. So CNN and MSDNC are a disgrace. And so are the others. I mean, they're pretty much all a disgrace. But it's an amazing period of time. Now we're going to NATO. And we'll we'll get a new set of problems. We'll solve a new set of problems.
Do you think you'll meet with Zelensky when you're there?
Yeah, probably. I'll see him. Yeah.
What would you say to him?
Say, how you doing? They're tough. He's in a tough situation. Should have never been there.
Sir, you said a couple days ago that you didn't think the U.S. should have to agree to the 5% increase in GDP on defense.
No.
Do you want to?
I was the one that said that's what they should be paying, as you know. No, I should do something. And they're having a problem with Spain. There's always a problem with Spain. Because Spain's not agreeing, which is very unfair to the rest of them, frankly.
So the U.S. won't be increasing our GDP to 5%.
We should pay what everyone else, they're in Europe, we're not. A lot of that money goes to rebuilding their bridges, their roads.
Okay, we're going to put away from that. The Prime Minister's just answering questions. It sounded a bit random, and it was a bit random, but he was taking questions from the journalists aboard Air Force One. And as you heard there, I guess putting the most positive conceivable construction on every question mark in the air now, where it comes to the Middle East and to everything he was asked about. He was absolutely sure, wasn't he, that the nuclear sites, the nuclear capacity of Iran had been utterly destroyed, not just damaged, but utterly destroyed, and that Iran had consequently given up all ambition to rebuild it or bring back any kind of nuclear program at any point in the future. He was absolutely sure. The idea of a reversion to violence, a break in the ceasefire, he did not see that happening now. There was no appetite as he saw it, just as he was absolutely sure that he felt no appetite whatever for regime change in Iran. That brought chaos, he said, and he did not want to see chaos. So there's a contrast there with the thinking as we understand it, as we've heard it from the leadership of Israel, which is an interesting point among many raised just in that brief impromptu press conference aboard Air Force One. And as for Ukraine, well, he said, would he be meeting Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine? Probably. That might happen, unless I suppose it doesn't. It didn't seem to be the highest item on the president's agenda, but that was not a surprise entirely either. We can talk about that, all of that later and more here on Pienaar and Friends on Times Radio with Barclays Business Banking. Grow your business. Bank on Barclays.
Here's the truth about AI. AI is only as powerful.
Business Banking. Grow your business. Bank on Barclays.
I'm John Pienaar, here with me on Pienaar and Friends this evening. Rachel Cunliffe from the New Statesman, Tim Montgomerie, who needs no further introduction, and Roger Boys, the World Affairs editor at the Times. Roger, can I come back to you? Just having listened there to President Trump on Air Force One. I know the answer to this question is I don't know. I realise that. But if the question is the ceasefire going to hold? Donald Trump, maybe he would say this, but he sounded as if he meant it. He thought it absolutely will. What's your feeling, your instinct at this moment?
Well, I think ceasefires have a rhythm, and on the first day of a ceasefire, it's customary to shoot as much as you can before it begins, and that's what we're seeing at the moment. I don't think there's any contradiction there. And the theatre of it all is important, really. It always has been. And if you look at things like the Good Friday Agreement and all these, they all involved bigging things up, slightly exaggerating what's been achieved and what hasn't been achieved, and buttering up people, and that's really what Trump is quite good at, and that's why, I know it sounds ridiculous that he's in the running for the Nobel Peace Prize and stuff, but he's sat down at some stage, or somebody has on his behalf, and worked out what are the ingredients of a convincing peace, and he's ticking it all off one by one, So what do I really think? Do I really think that Iran's nuclear arsenal has been destroyed? I don't. I'd be skeptical because of the sheer depth of Fordo. It's really, really deep down, and what seems to have. I'm no, aerial intelligence guy, but what seems to have been done is that the entrance routes into the tunnels have been blocked, and that will cause damage, and that's pretty much an achievement. Plus, the Israelis are on the case, so they were busy today knocking out things above ground, and they won't let this go.
No.
But they're pretending to let it go for the sake of Donald Trump's peace.
Yes. Which leaves that huge doubt in the air for a couple of reasons you identified there. One you mentioned earlier on, which is that you believe the Iranian regime is, if not teetering, very close to the brink now, is maybe not very far from actually falling. And Israel will have made its own calculations. And if that is their calculation too, it's a powerful stimulus to give it another push. And the way they've been giving it a push is by military action, targeted military action. They're not going to do it tonight or tomorrow, but at some point maybe soon. And when you throw in the fact that Iran's nuclear capability may not have been destroyed, and throw into that whatever 40 kilograms of enriched uranium has been moved away from the sites that were 400 in Israel's sites, well, they may already be partially on the way back to rebuilding that capability, which is another reason for Israel to resume the attack.
Yeah, that's sort of if you ask what can go wrong here, then
we do a lot of that.
We do a lot of that, and I do a lot of that too. And it's clear. First of all, there's still stuff around. There are secret sites. So if you got a situation where there is a succession crisis in Iran, a wing of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps starts to behave as if it's a future political class, pushes the clerics to one side perhaps, and does excludes international inspectors, and starts talking to malevolent nuclear powers like North Korea. Then they've kept the expertise, the nuclear expertise. I mean, a lot of people have been killed by the Israelis, but not everybody. And something bad could happen.
Yeah, and you've got to think, only Tim and Rachel, the sort of these doubts, they're going to be in the minds of a lot of those leaders, who are now gathered where Trump is headed now at the Hague. I'm sure he'll get a round of applause. He couldn't get a louder one that he got from Mark Rutte, the Secretary General of NATO.
Oh, wow.
This
quite a relationship, isn't it?
This was not meant to be published, as far as I understand it, but Donald Trump did. He doesn't seem to be oversensitive about these things. Poor Mark Rutte, doing his Trump whisperer routine, sent a message to the president, and he said congratulations. And he said a lot, actually, but he said, congratulations and thank you for your decisive action in Iran. That was truly extraordinary and something no one else dared to do. It makes us all safer. Now, I don't know how many other leaders are going to say that to Donald Trump's face when he gets to The Hague. A fair few of them are going to be thinking it, aren't they, Tim?
Yeah, well, look, I'm going to have a swoon moment myself for a couple of minutes, because Trump has made some big mistakes, and I've tried to acknowledge them when he has. But, we've had in the last week a supreme demonstration that America is still the indispensable nation. And, some people worry about how much time we spend, talking about them. But, last week we had our own, two of our own aircraft and, attacked in a place that they shouldn't have been attacked. We don't have much military to be attacked in the first place. And at the same time, it's sort of in a extraordinary juxtaposition, you had some of the most powerful aircraft in the world undertaking an extraordinarily sensitive operation in secrecy with a great deal of accuracy, perhaps not perfection, as Roger says. No other nation could have done what America did. And under the direction of a president who hates war. I think that's one thing we can genuinely agree on. He hates war. And there was always a danger that having someone who hates war in the White House would send out the message to the world that America would never act, that it would be too slow to act when there was a big danger. But America did act last week. And I definitely think we are safer because of it. And I'm glad America did. We're still miles away in Europe from being able to even contemplate doing something like that. And then just to cap it all off, my swoon moment, Trump really rebuked Israel today. That was a significant moment. I won't mention the word, but I think if I was Netanyahu, I would be worried. It's hard to think of in a previous time that an American president would have felt able to criticise Israel like that. Something has changed in America's attitude to Israel, partly because of the way they've conducted themselves in Gaza. That was the American president, for the first time in a dramatic way I can remember, marking Israel's card and saying, don't take us for granted. So there's a level of pragmatism and power in American leadership still. It's been bumpy recently, but I say thank God for America still on a week like this.
What are you saying, Rachel? I'm guessing you're not saying thank God for Donald Trump in quite the same way.
Well, I wish I shared Tim's optimism that this is the end of the story, or at least the end of the story for the moment. And the question is the ceasefire going to hold, and also, you know, what comes next? And I think the points about the possibility of this being the dying days of a regime, and this being the thing that could potentially lead to seismic political change in Iran. You've got to ask the question of what comes next. And we've seen countless examples where a regime that was in all kinds of ways hostile to the West or to its own people has fallen and been replaced, and what it's been replaced by has just created a whole new set of problems and chaos that has a tendency to escalate. So I know it's because I have chronic anxiety where Tim has chronic optimism. I'm delighted that the prospects of Iran developing a nuclear weapon have been lessened by all of this, but I don't feel quite as relaxed about it.
Okay, we're going to carry on. Yes,
I'm really excited about the cricket result at the moment. It's just, and I won't reveal what Rachel just said about that. Test cricket. My goodness.
In these dark times, what better time? I don't know how many people are absolutely gripped by this news. But whether you are or whether you're not, you might join us for a second in celebrating this news at a wonderful time. England have won the first Test against India by 5 wickets after a record-breaking run chase.
Amazing.
I think we're going to get more on that a bit later on. I'm not going to eclipse everything else with this news, but just 15 or 20 minutes after the news on England's victory at Headingley wouldn't be completely out of place, I don't think. Now, though, at 6:32, let's get the news with Laura Cook.
wherever you are. Pienaar Friends on Times Radio with Barclays Business Banking. Find out how Barclays can help to move your business forward. Search Barclays Business.
And Tim Montgomerie is here with me on Pienaar and Friends, as is Rachel Cunliffe, as is Roger Boyes. Special guest appearance, the Times World Affairs editor, and Kate Borsay, who will tell us now what goes on at 7 o'clock right after this. Hello, Kate.
Yeah, we'll speak to Elizabeth Ammon of the Times, actually. She has been at Headingley watching the cricket. England walked away for a victory after an awful first day where there were all kinds of disturbing questions being asked about Ben Stokes' choice to field first. It's all come back round marvellously, of course, and we can celebrate a momentous moment for England for once. So we'll do a little bit on that.
Cheering.
Yes. And Kate is in all England whites. People who are listening won't know.
I am actually.
Dressed for the occasion.
I am in whites today, especially to celebrate the team. That is absolutely true. We're going to focus on the NATO summit. We'll be going to Tom Newton-Dunn, who is there, finding out a little bit more about this kind of hyper-quick structure to the talks. We'll also, look, Donald Trump is at the moment on Air Force One, as you've been reporting, John. He has truth socialed. He's posted basically a message he got from Mark Rutte, the NATO Secretary General, basically calling him a huge peacemaker. He congratulated Trump on decisive action in Iran that was truly extraordinary, says Rutte, and something no one else dared to do. I mean, I wonder what other world leaders think about that. But regardless, I just have a feeling this evening that when that big state dinner happens, you've got all the NATO leaders meeting the King and Queen of the Netherlands. They're hosting a big dinner. I can just imagine that Donald Trump will be purposefully a little bit late, so he'll walk in to watch at that dinner. A huge round of applause.
Either that or he'll get there early and sit in the King's seat. and refuse to move.
Signing autographs. I just think that is what is going to happen tonight. Anyway, we will look at that and also the emerging row between Donald Trump and Pedro Sanchez, Spain's Prime Minister, because of course Spain have claimed that they've got an opt-out of this 5% defence spending demand. We'll be speaking to a Spanish academic focuses on politics about why Pedro Sanchez may have a point and whether he will truly ever win this battle with Donald Trump over defence spending. So plenty on that. And of course we are covering the latest on Israel and Iran. Much debate about who broke the ceasefire. Donald Trump seems to have gone down pretty heavy on Israel, actually, today. We'll be speaking to a former IDF military intelligence officer about that. And I've been speaking to an Iran expert this evening, Seema Sabat, who's a former journalist at Iran International TV. She feels it's not going to last, but gave me some really interesting information on whether there would be a regime change. Says it's something that the people of Iran have no appetite for at the moment. Of course, this is why Israel would sign up to this ceasefire, because it gives the chance for the people of Iran, in Israel's view, to do what Israel wants them to do. Israel doesn't want a part of it, but it wants the people of Iran to provoke a regime change. And Seema was telling me that some of the stuff Israel took out yesterday at the headquarters of the group that actually focuses on dissent in public, that's gone. Evin prison, of course, where political prisoners are gone, the symbolism of that going as well. So here you have Israel doing all they can to help the people of Iran overthrow the regime. Just some really interesting context to share with you there. So loads going on in the show. We look forward to joining everyone from 7.
And we look forward to hearing you right after this, Kate. So look, let's pick up the thread and talk a bit about NATO. President is going to be landing there, presumably maybe any time now. Am I looking at a picture of Air Force One? Yes, I am. Air Force One is on the ground in the Netherlands, and the President will be on his way to the summit. If he does what he sometimes does and has a bit of an impromptu media call when he gets off the plane, we'll have that for you. Whenever he speaks, I promise you we'll have it for you right here on Times Radio. He's heading for the NATO summit at The Hague. They're waiting for him. There'll be the big dinner this evening, hosted as well by the King of the Netherlands. And Roger Boyes is back with us. We've all of us seen summits come and go. There's nothing new about a summit, a big summit ending in a massive fudge. It's very much the pattern of summits, and there's going to be a massive fudge at this summit. There will also be some progress along the lines that is now accepted by everyone, pretty much everyone there, not everyone there, has to be the course that has to be taken, and that is more money on defence. So that will come out of this, and that is something fairly solid. You can argue not enough, but it's going to happen, Roger.
Yes, I mean, what is distinctive about this summit and indeed the G7 summit that came before is that people have factored in the attention span of Donald Trump. So it becomes a one-themed summit. And in G7 he left early, and here, well, I'm not quite sure when he's going to leave. But either way, it's essentially they've prepared the 5% target, and they haven't quite, as you mentioned earlier, quite solved all of the issues, like Spain, for example, which is really dragging its feet in terms of even reaching a little bit more than 2%. So unfortunately, this is probably going to be the nature of global diplomacy now. Yes. People are going to not want to offend Donald Trump. They're avoiding rows, avoiding bust because they lose. And Trump has this special power to win these kind of smash up rows.
Mr. Boyce, can I pull you up on one thing, if I may? This sort of idea that Donald Trump doesn't have much of an attention span. Now, that's true in a narrow sense. He likes his brief, short, etc. But he actually is. He's very good at sticking with some big themes. And, how often have we heard sort of Obama and Biden and George W. Bush say, NATO must do a little bit more, please, for, their defence. But Trump has made this a massive issue. He's thrown the environment up in the air. He's forced Europe to confront something they're unwilling to confront. He's actually very good at effecting change in a way that other presidents aren't. Sometimes for bad, I think in this case for good. And actually, he's sort of like a tortoise in some ways, rather than a hare in these things. And his service of NATO, John understandably laughs and scoffs a little bit at Mark Rutte's message to him. But actually, no American president has done actually more to build up NATO than Trump in getting them to Europe to finally start to defend itself properly. And so I'm on message today. But I think it's all justified.
I'm not in total disagreement with Tim. But I am in sort of 60% disagreement with him because, first of all, part of it is down to Trump's willful acceleration of issues because he doesn't want to stick too much on a single project because he gets bored, so he accelerates onto something else, and then everything gets thrown up into the air, and other people have to pick it up and glue the porcelain together, and something eventually comes out of it. So that's good. But it's a lot of broken china.
It's high risk.
It's high risk, It's high risk, and it doesn't always work. And that's the first thing.
Fair.
Yeah. And the second thing is, what I do like is sometimes, so he's, because of the MAGA influence, he's avoiding forever wars. But he doesn't avoid this fast, sharp strike thing. The killing of Soleimani, for example, in the first term, was actually quite a brilliant move because it highlighted the pernicious influence of all these proxy armies that were around. And now he's done the same. And it's not wrong what he's doing. He's not leaving behind mountains of casualties, and certainly not American casualties. Yes. So he's listening to the base.
And I suppose being against American military adventures, wanting to break away from that, doesn't necessarily make you entirely a peace lover. The president was at West Point Military Academy, wasn't he, a couple of weeks ago, and he was setting out the aims of the US military as the annihilation of America's enemies. And J.D. Vance was on social media today setting out what he described as a new doctrine for America in the world. And it had 3 stages. 1, identify an American interest. 2, make a demand, and 3, if the demand isn't made, then react with overwhelming force. That's not actually peace loving. That is just avoiding foreign, unending military entanglements.
Well, the most provocative thing is weakness. John. We've learned that throughout history. A weak America, a weak world policeman doesn't help anyone. So just because you have that capacity and willingness to annihilate your enemies if necessary, actually, there's less chance you actually need to use an army if people fear you.
Yeah. Yeah, well, indeed. No one's suggesting the annihilation of enemies if you don't need to. So we'll call that a point.
That's next week.
Well, I don't know. Looking at that list from JD Vance, was it identify an interest or something?
That's right.
Yeah. Does Greenland count?
Well, quite. It has been identified as an interest. Yeah. I put that to a former Defence Assistant Secretary earlier on. He said, "Oh, that's quite different." However, in Greenland, they may not be entirely.
You're all being very picky tonight.
Maybe we are. That's something else we do. And we're going to do more of that in just a moment. Roger, I know you have to leave. Great to come in.
Thank you.
Consider the door open. The invitation is open. Roger Boyes, World Affairs Editor.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
This is Pienaar and Friends on Times Radio with Barclays Business Banking. Find out how Barclays can help move your business forward. Search Barclays Business.
Wake up to
Pienaar and Friends, Tim Montgomerie and Rachel Cunliffe from the Statesman. I want to bring it home now because there's some big politics going on at Westminster, isn't there, guys? The welfare reform bill, which is due next Wednesday, I think, it's in deep trouble. There are, last count, I think 108 Labour members who are not willing to support that bill. They include maybe a dozen chairs of select committees. These are not the usual suspects, as they're always called on the left of the party, looking for a reason to put the boot in. Enough at anything like that number to kill the bill, which will be severe. This danger is really serious, Rachel, isn't it?
Well, you say not just the usual suspects. In fact, deliberately not led by the usual suspects, because the Labour MPs who are spearheading this rebellion, proto-rebellion, very much don't want it to be seen as, the awkward squad. They see it as fundamental to what the Labour Party is and what they were elected in Parliament to do. And there's a huge range there. You've got select committee chairs. Meg Hillier is sort of the big name leading it all. And Louise Haigh, obviously, who was a Transport Secretary. But you've also got new MPs. You've got MPs who've been around for a while and seen how things work. You've got the kind who you'd expect wouldn't be sort of working their way up the ministerial ladder, so wouldn't be rebelling on something like this. And it's just growing and growing. There were so many names on the first draft of this letter that when it was published, then there were a whole lot of other MPs who went, "Oh, I didn't know about this. Yes, I want to put my name to it." And it's difficult to see an elegant solution for this on the government. I mean, Kemi Badenoch has helpfully come out this evening and said that she'll lend her Conservative MPs votes to help the government push through its welfare reforms, but only on 3 conditions: bringing down the overall welfare budget, getting people back into work, both of which are things that the Labour government wants to do, and promising no new tax rises. So that's just her being as awkward as possible. And anyway, if you are a government, particularly a government with a huge majority, relying on opposition votes to get controversial legislation through that your own MPs don't back is a highly dangerous place to be in. And
Pippa Crerar, who's a highly respected lobby journalist, has put her latest take on social media. She says, despite Liz Kendall, the Work and Pensions Secretary, and other cabinet ministers being locked in talks trying to convince the welfare rebels not to vote down the bill, Pippa says untold the number of Labour MPs planning to do so has gone up from 108 to 127. That is not a rebellion that's going to be diffused on any precedent that I can think of. I spoke earlier to Ruth Jones, just one of the rebels who is not by any means normally a rebel, and I put it to her, would she stand by that? Threats of her never getting a government job, losing the whip, even the threats of Keir Starmer's credibility. This is what she said.
Well, look, if I was young and just starting out in politics, then I might worry about that, but I'm not.
Oh, well, you're not worried about that. What about losing the whip? You'd be booted out of the parliamentary party. You couldn't run as a Labour MP at the next election.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that you have to think about, and I have thought very, very hard about it. I didn't come into this place to make people worse off, and I certainly didn't come in to kick the disabled. So I'm very, very clear that I want to see changes, and I'm very happy to listen to people as they're telling me what they can do to make things better.
But in your heart, you would be prepared to face that as a consequence of a decision not to back the bill. You would be ready to lose the Labour Party whip and be outside the parliamentary party, would you?
Well, at the moment, those are the rules, and yes, that's what it would mean.
That is serious stuff, isn't it? I mean, if you've got a rebellion this big, they're not going to take the whip away from dozens of Labour MPs. So what are the options? Well, you pull the bill, that would be catastrophic. The talk of Keir Starmer, this being an issue of confidence, you can't take that literally either. Starmer's not going to resign if he loses this bill, but there'll be a massive extra big hole in the government. Spending plans and its welfare reform plan would have a massive hole in it too, Tim.
Well, I think this is an opportunity for Keir Starmer to really reflect on his own the nature of his leadership. This is a very big moment, and not just about welfare. I've been surprised that the Parliamentary Labour Party have been so accepting of a number of things. The aid budget, which Gordon Brown was so proud of when he was Chancellor, was slashed overnight without any consultation, barely a murmur from the Parliamentary Party. They adopted positions on immigration that probably make reform a bit squeamish in a couple of places. I can list other examples of where Keir Starmer really hasn't taken his party with him, and the party has finally snapped. And this is a huge rebellion, and as Rachel said, it's going to get bigger, because when you have basically all of your colleagues rebelling, if you don't rebel, you look like you don't care about the issue at all. And what I would say to Keir Starmer, and general advice, is be kind and to people, particularly when you're on the way up. We all remember how he treated people like Diane Abbott and other parliamentary candidates when it didn't matter because he was winning. Labour backbenchers, when they see their party leader behave like that, when they don't see kindness or subtlety, they think, well, how will he treat me if I'm ever in that sort of position? There's lots of skills in a party leader. You have to have policy nous, you have to have a vision, you have to be good at speaking, master detail. But one of the most underestimated qualities is managing people. There's a lot of egos in politics. There's a lot of passion. Keeping that enterprise together, looking after people. Mrs. Thatcher spent an hour and a half every evening writing handwritten notes to people. Starmer has not understood that this is an essential part of his job. He hasn't kept the Labour Party together. He's got to obviously correct the welfare issue. But if he doesn't make a fundamental course correction in the nature of his leadership, this Parliament's doomed already before it's even started. This is a big potatoes moment for him.
And when it comes to this particular bill, the government's going to have to back off. They're going to have to retreat and at least decide between now and Wednesday not to have that vote on that Wednesday.
Yeah, I think they're going to have to postpone it. They're going to have to introduce some kind of sweetener and say we're not pulling it completely, but we've got away and we've decided that we're going to change the rules in this way, and that will alleviate some concerns. Wait for the impact, the full impact assessments, and wait to have that fight. Obviously, that's very expensive. It's expensive in terms of money. It's also very expensive in terms of authority, because once your backbenchers realise that they can hold the leadership to account and they can make the government change course, that's not something that you do once and then forget that you have that power over. And I think Tim is right that this is the culmination of a number of frustrations that have been going on for the last year. Like we've talked actually on this show and elsewhere about how up until now the Labour backbenchers have been, in private they may have been very upset and they may have been anonymous briefing, but in public they have withheld from directly criticising the leadership up until now. So you've got to see it as a culmination of frustration over winter fuel allowance, being asked to go out and sell something that was very unpopular when there was then a U-turn, some of the immigration commentary, and a number of just other sort of not feeling listened to. And so the dent to the government's authority, if they do postpone it, have some kind of face-saving measure, that is substantial, and that's going to be an issue that even if they get through this, will continue to affect the leadership throughout the rest of the Parliament.
Right. And I know we're crossing bridges that haven't been burned yet, but we're going to come back to this next week. You can bet in the build-up to that big vote on Wednesday, at which point we're going to be, if we're where we are now, then we're going to be talking about how on earth does Starmer, in particular, how does he put a brave face on what may be about to happen? How does he make a surrender, a retreat, look like an act of generosity and listening? Because that is going to be the challenge. Look, we've got a couple of minutes before the end of the show, and just to cheer me up, if nobody else, but I know it's not just me, we're going to get the news from Headingley. What a result!
Yeah, that was absolutely remarkable. It was Test match cricket at its absolute best. I mean, you go into day 5 with all 4 results possible: an England-India win, the draw and the tie, and then it goes down right to the end of day 5. England are an incredible chasing team under Ben Stokes. He raised a lot of eyebrows before a ball was bowled on day 1 when he said we'll have a bowl first. Chasing 371 in tricky conditions isn't something that scares this team. When you're chasing a target that big, you need at least one of your batters in the top 3 to go big. England had that in Ben Duckett. He made an incredible 139. His form with the bat in all formats is great form. Continues. There was a little wobble when England were 252 for 2 and cruising. They lost 2 wickets and 2 balls. Duckett got out, and then Brooke got out for a goal. And Duckett, at that point, you thought, could England maybe get themselves in trouble? But Joe Root was there. He passed 50, got them through. Jamie Smith played beautifully, and it was Test cricket at its best. 5 captivating days, and England got over the line in the end.
Sam Allard, you get across the excitement. So
I do. I love cricket. It's good.
Yeah, and you say it's cricket at its best. It's cricket as it's not been played before. We're talking here about going back to good old baseball, aren't we? Just or nothing.
No, you're right. So I think the first half of baseball, I would say, was aggressive cricket, but I'd say at times reckless cricket. I think in the kind of last 18 months of baseball, the aggressive approach is still 100% there. But I actually think they've got better at also managing the situation more. So we still see some of the crazy shots. We still see some of the quirky fields and all that. But I do think this team are better at when up against it, knowing that, and then at times not being able to dig in and going a little bit more old school.
And it was the biggest, best run chase in Test history.
Say that again.
Was it the best chase we've seen?
No,
really?
No, it was good. It wasn't that good.
Oh, really?
It was the second highest run chase England have done in English conditions. So it's still pretty impressive, but not the highest of all time, no. But might make the top 20 maybe. So still pretty good, still pretty impressive.
Second best in England in
that's
England.
Good, yeah, and that's saying something. Yes, that's impressive.
Well, certainly. I know. Look, forgive me if people are losing patience with all this, but I don't really care. You don't care either, Rachel.
I didn't understand a word of that, but I loved hearing you talk about it. It was inspirational.
When you were talking, I had no idea what you were talking about either, so it's fine. Well, I think my job's more fun than your job, though. I think you guys have to deal with much more serious subjects, where I just get to watch sports. So
I feel exhilarated having listened to that.
Were you watching the second Test match?
That's a practice, right?
No, not quite. Wednesday, I want to see
guys, I've got to leave it there. Sam Allard, you've made my day, and I know a lot of people listening, which is more than we can normally say on this show on any given day. It's been lovely to have you here, Tim, though, nonetheless, and Rachel, thank you for listening. Angus Mitchell was our producer, and Isaac Marley on the keyboards. I'm going to be back tomorrow, and Kate is up next. This is Times Radio.
Across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio, the voice of the Times.
Thanks, John. Have a great night. The celebrations continue. I tell you, it's 7 o'clock. This is the evening edition with Kate Borsay. Coming up.
We basically have 2 countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what they're doing. Do you understand that?
Yeah, that was Donald Trump's frustration towards both Iran and Israel, but he insists the ceasefire is still in effect. We'll bring you the very latest with expert analysis. We'll also head live to the